Listen here, the voice dripped with rehearsed superiority, unless you're ready to drop serious cash, you're blocking real customers. The words slithered across the marble floor of the flagship tech store like venom. The small cluster of sales associates and wannabe entrepreneurs, a pack of 20-somethings in designer hoodies and minimalist sneakers, snickered in unison. It was a sharp, territorial sound, the kind of laughter that reinforces social hierarchy. They saw what their ringleader, Kyle Morrison, saw: an easy mark, an elderly woman with hair the color of steel wool and storm clouds, dressed in a faded denim jacket and worn jeans. She was an anachronism in this temple of glass and innovation, a place where venture capital and cryptocurrency were the only languages that mattered. But the woman, Dr. Margaret Chen, offered no acknowledgement. Her face, a landscape of experience etched by decades far from the comfort of climate-controlled showrooms, remained perfectly neutral. Her gaze, dark and penetrating, didn't even shift toward the sales associate. She was completely absorbed in the device before her, a prototype quantum computing workstation, a monument of technology with processing power that could crack encryption algorithms in seconds. Her silence created a void. And Kyle, a man who fed on attention and validation, rushed to fill it with more of his own hubris. He saw her as a waste of his time, a non-entity in the high-stakes game of his monthly numbers. He had investor meetings to attend, a Tesla lease payment due, and this fossil was occupying valuable space in his section. He didn't notice the way her fingers, though age-spotted, hovered over the machine's cooling vents with practiced familiarity, as if recognizing an old colleague. He didn't see that her examination was not the aimless browsing of a confused retiree, but a methodical expert evaluation. Her eyes weren't merely observing, they were analyzing. They traced the thermal distribution patterns, noted the positioning of the quantum processors, and assessed the efficiency of the cryogenic cooling system visible through the transparent housing. She was deconstructing it, comprehending it, not as a consumer product, but as an instrument. But a man like Kyle was blind to such nuance. He saw only surface details, old, outdated, and therefore irrelevant. He saw a target for his casual mockery, a way to amuse the junior associates and reinforce his own precarious status. The supreme irony, hanging invisible in the air thick with the scent of expensive coffee and new electronics, was that in this entire building filled with self-proclaimed innovators and cutting-edge technology, the most brilliant, most accomplished, and most pioneering individual was the one he had just dismissed as obsolete. And while the group laughed, a different observer watched from a glass-walled office overlooking the showroom floor. Dr. James Park, founder and CEO of the entire tech empire, saw her posture. He saw the way her weight distribution suggested perfect balance, the subtle alertness in her bearing. He saw the quiet expertise that spoke volumes without uttering a word. He leaned forward, a spark of recognition flickering in his experienced eyes, a memory surfacing from a classified research paper he'd once read in graduate school. He didn't know her name yet, but he recognized her archetype. It was a type he hadn't encountered in decades, and certainly never in a retail environment. He knew with the certainty that had guided him through 3 successful startups that something significant was about to unfold. If you believe that true brilliance doesn't need to advertise itself, then you're in the right place. The sales associate Kyle continued his performance, mistaking Margaret's composure for confusion or incompetence. He circled the workstation, his gestures deliberately theatrical, his voice pitched to carry across the entire floor. "This is the Quantum Core X9, ma'am. 12,000 qubits, processing capabilities that could simulate molecular interactions in real time. It's extremely complex technology, probably way beyond your comprehension level." He tapped the sleek chassis with a proprietary flourish. "The neural interface alone is more sophisticated than the entire computing infrastructure from your generation. We're talking adaptive AI integration, holographic display projection, quantum entanglement communication. It's essentially a supercomputer disguised as a workstation. You'd need a PhD in quantum physics just to boot it up." The junior associates chuckled again, dutiful backup singers to their lead vocalist. They were ambitious, aggressive, and had absorbed their methodology from Kyle's playbook, which meant they categorized customers based on the tech they carried and the brands they wore. Margaret, in her practical thrift store jacket and decades-old watch, had been Ed under, no potential, safe to ridicule. Yet she remained undisturbed. She moved from the front of the workstation to the side, her movements measured and purposeful. She knelt down, her joints articulating with surprising fluidity that defied her apparent age, and examined the underside. Her attention wasn't on the aesthetic LED lighting strips or the fancy cable management system. It was on the power distribution unit, the quantum chip architecture, the revolutionary cooling infrastructure. She was reading the machine's foundation, the technological skeleton beneath the polished exterior. Kyle watched her kneel and rolled his eyes dramatically for his audience's benefit. "Whoa there, careful you don't hurt yourself, Grandma. We have demo videos available. They show all the features so you don't have to go crawling around on my showroom floor." For more stories where quiet brilliance triumphs over loud arrogance, and where true expertise speaks through action rather than words, make sure to subscribe to The Final Watch. Now, back to our story. The insult was more pointed this time, the cruelty more deliberate. A customer examining a nearby holographic display glanced over, disapproval crossing their features, but they remained silent. No one ever intervened. To challenge someone like Kyle was to invite his scorn upon yourself, and it was simpler to remain a passive observer. Margaret rose slowly, her expression still an unreadable portrait of calm. She ignored him entirely. Her focus shifted to the interface panel. She reached up, her fingers finding a small, nearly invisible pin on her jacket lapel. It was a simple metallic device, no larger than a coin. To the uninformed observer, it was just old jewelry. To the educated eye, it was the insignia of DARPA's Advanced Computing Research Division, but a variant so rare, with a small superimposed circuit pattern, that it was only ever awarded to a handful of scientists in projects that remained classified. She ran her thumb over its familiar contours, an unconscious gesture of centering. Then she reached toward the interface panel of the Quantum Core X9. The haptic surface illuminated at her approach, casting blue light across her weathered features. Kyle saw his opportunity to reassert dominance. Hey, don't touch the equipment unless you're prepared to discuss payment terms. You leave a smudge on that quantum glass, my tech team spends an hour recalibrating it." He started moving toward her, his body language aggressive, ready to physically prevent her from interacting with the machine she was so obviously unqualified to even approach. His assumption, a towering monument built on pure prejudice, was that she was a lost elderly woman, a nuisance to be dismissed. He could not have been more mistaken. The quiet mastery she embodied was a compressed spring, and his relentless arrogance was applying increasing pressure. The universe has a peculiar way of restoring equilibrium, and the bill for Kyle's hubris was about to be presented with compounded interest. The normal atmosphere of the tech store shattered with a sound that didn't belong. It wasn't the subtle chime of the entrance sensors or the soft hum of advanced cooling systems. It was a violent crash of breaking glass followed by multiple sharp electronic pops. Every head in the showroom snapped toward the massive display windows facing the delivery area. An automated cargo drone carrier, its platform loaded with millions in prototype hardware, was moving, not gliding under control, but drifting silently with no operator visible at the console. It was advancing slowly initially, a floating behemoth of carbon fiber and electronics, but gaining momentum down the slight grade of the lot. Its trajectory, directly toward the glass wall of the showroom where they all stood. Then they saw the technician. The operator slumped over the control station, his face a ghastly shade of pale. A medical emergency, a catastrophic malfunction, it didn't matter. The multi-ton platform was now an unguided missile aimed at their fragile world of glass and innovation. Panic detonated. It was sudden and primal. Sales associates who were predators moments before became prey, their confidence dissolving into pure terror. They scattered, shouting, fumbling for devices. Customers screamed and dove for cover, toppling displays of expensive peripherals and limited edition merchandise. The carefully maintained illusion of cool, professional sophistication evaporated instantly. Kyle Morrison was paralyzed. For all his bravado, for all his posturing, he was a statue of fear. His mouth gaped open, his designer outfit suddenly feeling like a costume. He was frozen by the raw, unscripted reality of genuine crisis. In that moment of pandemonium, only one person moved with intention. Dr. Margaret Chen, the fossil, the grandma, the irrelevant nuisance, became a study in efficient motion. She didn't flee from danger. She advanced toward it. Her previous deliberate, measured movements vanished, replaced by an economy of motion that was extraordinary to witness. She evaluated the situation in milliseconds, her mind a supercomputer processing trajectories, velocity, and potential impact zones. The carrier was approximately 50 meters out and accelerating. It would cross a landscaped strip, mount a decorative barrier, and then crash through the glass, obliterating millions in inventory and potentially everyone still frozen in its path. Kyle, finally shocked from his paralysis by the proximity of mortality, saw her moving toward the exit. His panic. Ed's brain registered only confusion. The old woman was in the way. He lunged, not to assist, but to control the situation. He grabbed her arm. "Get back! What are you doing?" he shouted, his voice breaking with terror. It was the final error he would commit that day. The arm he grabbed felt like reinforced titanium. With a subtle twist of her wrist, so minimal it was almost invisible, she broke his grip. The motion redirected his own momentum against him, sending him stumbling backward where he collided with a display pedestal and collapsed onto the polished concrete floor. The physical contact, the strike from our story's title, was not an act of aggression from her, but the natural consequence of his ignorant panic colliding with her immovable competence. He had, essentially, struck himself against the unyielding wall of her expertise. She never even acknowledged him. Her eyes remained locked on the objective. Margaret was already through the entrance doors, her practical shoes striking the pavement outside. The air was filled with alert sirens from the building's emergency system as sensors detected the approaching threat. She didn't hesitate. She ran. Not with the frantic, desperate energy of panic, but with the focused, grounded stride of someone whose body had been conditioned by decades of rigorous training. She wasn't simply an elderly woman. She was an instrument calibrated for precisely this type of emergency. The distance to the runaway carrier was closing rapidly. The barrier was her first obstacle. She didn't climb over it. She vaulted it, one hand briefly contacting the surface for balance in a display of remarkable athleticism. She was now in the service lane, directly in the path of the drifting behemoth. The front of the carrier platform loomed above her, a wall of composite materials and sensors. The sounds from the showroom, the screams, the shattering of a toppled display, faded to a distant murmur. In her mind, there was only clarity. The clarity of absolute concentration, the clarity of purpose. She reached the carrier and in one fluid sequence grabbed the safety rail and emergency access panel, planting her foot on the maintenance step. The platform was traveling at approximately 20 km per hour now, a lethal velocity for a multi-ton automated vehicle. With a surge of wiry strength that seemed impossible for her frame, she pulled herself up and accessed the emergency override panel. The stricken technician was deadweight against the console, his hand mercifully away from the controls, but the carrier still in autonomous mode, coasting in a deadly drift. There was no space to move him aside, no time to render aid. She swung herself onto the platform, her body contorting to fit into the narrow space between the unconscious operator and the control station. She couldn't reach the emergency brake control. Her position was awkward, her access leamy. Ted. The showroom window was now less than 10 meters away, a panorama of terrified faces staring out at her. This was the convergence point where physics and expertise met. She couldn't halt it with the emergency brake, so she wouldn't try. Her hand shot to the navigation override interface. With practiced, forceful input, she activated manual control and redirected the propulsion system. The carrier's motors, which had been coasting, whined in protest as they were commanded to reverse thrust while maintaining directional control. The platform shuddered violently, its velocity decreasing, but insufficiently. Her other hand was already on the directional controls, fighting the automated systems trying to correct her inputs. She identified her window of opportunity, not a literal window of glass, but a narrow corridor between a row of parked delivery vehicles and a reinforced support column. It was a gap barely wider than the carrier itself, a needle that required perfect threading. She commanded the turn. The massive platform responded, groaning as it veered away from the showroom. For a terrifying instant, it appeared it would shear the corner off a custom delivery van. But her control was absolute. The edge of the carrier cleared the van's housing by less than 3 centimeters. She was now directing it toward the grassy embankment at the property's edge. With another forceful input and a final calculated adjustment of trajectory, she guided the platform up the incline. The resistance of the soft terrain and the upward angle finally absorbed the remaining momentum. The carrier rolled to a stop, its front sensor array gently contacting a landscaping boulder with a soft impact. The motors cycled down and powered off, and then there was profound, absolute silence. The chaos had ended. The only sound was the electronic whine of cooling systems and the distant wail of approaching emergency vehicles. Dr. Margaret Chen remained on the platform, her breathing steady, her hands stable. She had not saved the day through brute force, but through a breathtaking demonstration of precision, knowledge, and grace under extreme pressure. It was a flawless emergency intervention, and no one present had the frame of reference to comprehend what they had just witnessed. From his office window, Dr. James Park had observed everything. He hadn't seen a confused elderly woman. He had seen a tactical systems intervention executed with a level of expertise he hadn't witnessed since his early career working with DARPA's most classified projects. As silence descended upon the store, broken only by the first gasps of relief from customers, he moved. He strode from his office, his presence immediately commanding attention on the floor. His expression, marked by the authority of someone who had built technological empires, was set like granite. The sales associates, including a pale and trembling Kyle Morrison who had picked himself up from the floor, stood at something assembling attention, their terror replaced by awe and confusion. "Someone call emergency services for that technician and secure the delivery area," Dr. Park commanded, his voice a low resonance that brooked no debate. Then he walked past them all, his eyes fixed on the carrier platform resting peacefully on the embankment. He walked through the entrance doors, across the pavement, and directly to the platform. Margaret was assisting the unconscious technician, carefully repositioning his weight and checking his vital signs. She looked up as Dr. Park approached, her expression as composed as ever. There was no indication of adrenaline, no tremor in her movements. She was a professional who had simply completed a procedure. Dr. Park stopped a few feet from the platform and simply observed her. He noticed the obscure pin on her jacket, and a name finally surfaced from a 25-year-old memory of a legendary research paper he had once studied, a paper so classified it was referenced only in the most secure academic circles. "Chen," he said, his voice quieter now, filled with dawning recognition. "Dr. Margaret Chen." Margaret simply nodded once. "Dr. Park," she replied, her voice calm and measured, acknowledging his position with a subtle inclination of her head. The recognition was mutual. It wasn't a reunion, it was an activation of a profound, unspoken respect. Back in the showroom, Kyle Morrison had followed Dr. Park outside, his mind struggling to process the impossible sequence of events. He witnessed the CEO speaking to the elderly woman, not with condescension, but with a deference so genuine it was almost tangible. "Sir," Kyle began, his voice unsteady, "Sir, I don't comprehend what." Dr. Park turned his head slowly, and his gaze settled on Kyle. It was a look that could extinguish fire. "No, son," he said, his voice dangerously quiet, "you don't comprehend. You don't comprehend anything at all." He turned his attention back to Margaret. "It's gratifying to see you're still maintaining your capabilities, Dr. Chen." He then looked back at the showroom, at the crowd of stunned employees and customers who had gathered at the windows. He raised his voice so everyone could hear. "Everyone, listen carefully. You think you just witnessed some fortunate elderly person stop a runaway platform. You have absolutely no conception of what you actually witnessed." Dr. Park walked back toward the showroom, his stride powerful and deliberate. Margaret followed several paces behind, her task completed. The paramedics were arriving, their vehicles pulling up as they rushed to attend to the carrier's operator. Dr. Park stopped at the entrance, turning to face the assembled crowd. Kyle stood at the front, his expression a mixture of shame and complete bewilderment. "This individual," Dr. Park began, gesturing toward Kyle without looking at him, "spent the past hour disrespecting a living legend. He judged based on superficial appearance, and in doing so, he humiliated himself and this entire organization." Dr. Park's eyes swept over the junior associates, who now stared at the floor, their faces burning with embarrassment. "Let me inform you precisely who you were mocking," he said, his voice rising with controlled intensity. He turned and gestured directly at Margaret. "You are looking at Dr. Margaret Chen, retired. And when I say retired, I mean she completed a 30-year career in DARPA's Advanced Systems Division working on projects you've never heard of and never will. Projects that went where conventional technology couldn't go and achieved what conventional wisdom said was impossible." He stepped closer to the crowd, his gaze locking on Kyle. "You mocked her for being old. That elderly woman has more experience operating advanced automated systems in crisis conditions than all of you have using smartphones in normal circumstances. You questioned whether she could understand that workstation." He gestured dismissively toward the Quantum Core X9 inside. "She designed the fundamental quantum algorithms that make that technology possible. She can reprogram that system's core architecture from memory while simultaneously troubleshooting hardware failures under emergency conditions." The revelation landed like successive shockwaves. The crowd stood silent, expression stunned. The narrative was so incredible, so far beyond their realm of experience that it was difficult to process. But Dr. Park's authority was unquestionable. Her official designation was Senior Research Scientist in Autonomous Systems and Quantum Computing. Her unofficial title, the one her research team gave her, was the Architect, because she could design, build, and operate anything with a processor. She developed control systems for autonomous vehicles in hazardous environments, created fail-safe protocols for critical infrastructure, and pioneered quantum computing applications in scenarios where conventional computers were useless. She has managed system failures during military operations, navigated technological crises, and solved problems that weren't supposed to have solutions. What you just observed, that incident with the carrier, for her, that was a routine Tuesday morning. He let the words resonate in the air. Then he did something that crystallized the moment into legend. Dr. James Park, a renowned technology CEO, a man who had advised governments and led technological revolutions, turned to face Dr. Margaret Chen. He straightened his posture, positioned himself formally, and extended his hand in the most respectful professional gesture he had offered in years. "Dr. Chen," he said, his voice resonating with profound respect, "it is an honor, truly, to finally meet you in person." A flicker of emotion crossed Margaret's features, a small, knowing smile. She accepted the handshake with a precision that was ingrained in her very being. "Good to see you, James," she said softly. The image burned into the memory of everyone present, the celebrated CEO showing profound deference to the quiet elderly woman, a silent, powerful acknowledgement of a hidden world of brilliance and competence existing just beneath the surface of their ordinary lives. Kyle Morrison looked as though he wanted the polished floor to open and consume him entirely. The aftermath of that day created seismic changes. A customer had recorded the entire event on their device, from Kyle's initial insults to Margaret's impossible feat of intervention to Dr. Park's stunning display of respect. The video was uploaded with a straightforward title, "Tech Associate Mocks Elderly Woman. She Proceeds to Save Everyone." Within hours, it went viral. It exploded across every social platform, a perfect self-contained narrative of arrogance humbled by quiet brilliance. Media outlets amplified it, and soon the story of Dr. Margaret Chen, the architect, became an international phenomenon. The company, Park Technologies, was thrust into an intense spotlight. Communications flooded in, not just from potential customers, but from scientists, from technology professionals, from people worldwide who were inspired by the narrative. The company's market value increased significantly within a week. But Dr. Park was interested in a different form of value. The day after the incident, he called Kyle Morrison into his office. Kyle entered like someone facing judgment. He was pale, exhausted, and fully anticipating termination. He knew he deserved it. "Sit down, Morrison," Dr. Park said, his voice neutral. Kyle sat. Dr. Park didn't raise his voice or lecture. He simply slid a printed document across his desk. It was a compilation of responses from the viral video. "Read them," he ordered. Kyle read, "My grandmother was treated exactly like this at a hospital last month. Thank you, Dr. Chen. This is what genuine expertise looks like. No ego, pure competence. That associate represents everything problematic with modern culture. All surface, no substance. I'm a researcher." Seeing that handshake from Dr. Park gave me profound respect. Kyle read response after response, each one a fresh wave of shame. He had become a symbol of everything he never intended to represent, a bully, an ignorant fool, a cautionary tale. When he finished, he looked up, his eyes filled with authentic remorse. "Sir, I have no justification. I was arrogant. I was cruel. I am profoundly sorry. You should terminate me." Dr. Park observed him for an extended moment. "Firing you would be simple, Morrison. It would absolve you. You'd find another sales position and likely repeat the same patterns eventually. I have a more effective approach." He leaned forward. "You're going to learn. You're going to personally compose a letter of apology to Dr. Chen. Then you're going to lead a new initiative at this company. We are now officially a STEM education partnership organization. You will oversee recruiting, training, and mentoring individuals from underrepresented backgrounds in technology for every department here, from sales to research. You will learn what authentic character looks like. You will learn what dedication means. You will learn respect, not as a sales technique, but as a fundamental principle. This will be your exclusive responsibility. Your success will not be measured in units sold, but in lives transformed. Am I clear?" Kyle was stunned into silence. It wasn't punishment, it was an opportunity for redemption. A difficult, humbling, and profound opportunity. "Yes, sir," he said, his voice thick with emotion, absolutely clear. While the world was transforming her into a legend, Dr. Margaret Chen wanted nothing to do with it. She politely declined every interview request, every offer for a memoir deal, every invitation to appear on broadcasts. The attention and publicity were foreign to her. She had spent a lifetime operating in quiet obscurity, and that was where she remained most comfortable. Her satisfaction came from the simple knowledge of a task well executed, of a crisis prevented. Dr. Park located her modest home and visited personally a few days later. He found her in her workshop, meticulously calibrating components for a vintage computer she was restoring. He didn't arrive with media representatives or symbolic gestures. He came with 2 cups of tea and the authorization codes for a brand new top-specification Quantum Core X9, the exact model she had been examining, arranged for delivery. "It's yours, Dr. Chen," he said simply, "a gift from a grateful organization, or at least a grateful CEO." Margaret cleaned her hands on a cloth and looked at the documentation, then back at Dr. Park. "I appreciate the gesture, James," she said, using his first name naturally, "but I cannot accept it as a gift. I will purchase it, though. I was planning to anyway. Establish a standard payment plan for me, market interest rate." Dr. Park started to object, but he recognized the expression in her eyes. It was the same unwavering resolve he'd witnessed in the delivery area. For her, accepting it as a gift would diminish the accomplishment, would transform her professional action into a transaction. Earning it, paying her own way, was a matter of principle, the core of her identity. He simply nodded. "Very well, Margaret. We'll prepare the paperwork." The story of her quiet refusal to accept the gift only enhanced her growing legend when Dr. Park shared it with his leadership team. The company transformed. Kyle Morrison, true to his commitment, dedicated himself to the STEM education program with the intensity of someone who had found purpose. He discovered he possessed a talent for it. He could see past the often awkward barriers to entry in technology and recognize the intelligence, integrity, and problem-solving capabilities that lay beneath. The company became a model for inclusive technology education. And Kyle, the once arrogant associate, became a passionate advocate, his life given new, more meaningful direction. The staff at Park Technologies established their own tradition. On the pristine showroom floor, precisely where the carrier would have crashed through the glass, they installed a strip of metallic inlay. They called it the silicon line. It was a reminder to never judge a person by appearance, a reminder that the quietest individual in any space is often the most capable, a reminder of the day a fossil demonstrated what true professionalism looked like. The line became integral to the company's culture, a story shared with every new employee, a permanent lesson embedded in their organizational identity. A year passed. Park Technologies was more successful than it had ever been. It wasn't merely a place to purchase technology anymore, it was a community hub, particularly for aspiring technologists from diverse backgrounds. The STEM education program under Kyle's surprisingly effective leadership had become a nationally recognized model. Kyle himself was a transformed individual. The slick, condescending persona was gone, replaced by quiet, authentic confidence. He no longer measured his value in sales numbers, but in the successful careers he helped launch for the people he mentored. He frequently told new participants the story of his own humbling, not with shame, but as evidence that even the most ignorant person could learn and evolve. He presented it as the most valuable lesson of his life, a lesson delivered by a quiet elderly woman in a denim jacket. The silicon line was no longer just inlay. It was now a permanent, elegant strip of illuminated circuitry embedded into the floor with a small discrete plaque beside it. The plaque didn't contain lengthy flowery text. It simply read, "The silicon line. Respect is the distance between assumption and truth." It became a point of interest. Customers would inquire about it, and the employees, many of them program graduates themselves, would share the story with reverence. The tale of Dr. Margaret Chen had become institutional mythology, a foundational narrative for the company's new identity. It was a constant, silent teacher, embodying the organization's core values more effectively than any corporate documentation or mission statement ever could. Margaret, for her part, continued her quiet existence. She made her monthly payments on her Quantum Core X9 punctually, every time. She was occasionally observed at the company, not in the showroom, but in the research laboratory. IES. She'd be there in her simple clothing, conversing quietly with younger engineers, many of them graduates of the program Kyle had developed. She'd point out an elegant algorithmic solution or demonstrate a more efficient approach to quantum gate sequencing. She never lectured, she simply shared. She was a mentor, a living repository of technological wisdom, passing on her legacy not through presentations or speeches, but through small practical acts of competence. Her presence was a quiet blessing, a reminder of the standard they all aspired to achieve. She had saved more than just lives and property that day. She had saved the character of an organization and the soul of an individual. Her one dramatic action had created ripples of positive change that continued spreading quietly and powerfully, touching countless lives in its wake. The legend was not about the single moment of crisis, it was about the enduring legacy it created. The true impact of that day wasn't measured in viral video metrics or media coverage. It was measured in the slow, steady current of transformation that followed. It was visible in the young computer science graduate who struggled with imposter syndrome and couldn't find opportunities, discovering confidence and capability as a lead developer under Margaret's informal mentorship. It was visible in the way the entire staff, now a mix of diverse backgrounds and experiences, learned from Kyle to treat every single person who entered with dignity, regardless of their appearance. The story became a teaching parable, a modern fable about the virtues of humility and the danger of prejudice. The legacy of Dr. Margaret Chen was not historical, it was living and active. It was present in every interaction, in every respectful conversation, in every aspiring technologist who received a fair opportunity at a new future. The illuminated line on the floor was more than a memorial to a past event, it was a starting line for a better approach to everything. It was a daily reminder that competence is quiet, that strength doesn't require boasting, and that the most valuable qualities a person possesses are their character and their expertise, things that cannot be assessed by a glance or measured by a resume. True legacy isn't what you preserve in archives. It's what continues to move forward in the people you inspire. It's the standard of conduct that outlives the single moment of recognition. It's the quiet professional who, by simply being herself, taught an entire community that the content of one's character and the depth of one's ability are the only metrics that truly matter. Her silence in the face of mockery was her armor. Her action in the face of chaos was her voice. And the enduring respect she commanded, earned through a lifetime of quiet competence, was her victory. For more stories where quiet competence triumphs over loud assumption, and where silent strength defines true worth, subscribe to The Final Watch.